The air crackled, heavy with unspoken truths. We are, each of us, a walking apocalypse, because we desperately need to grasp the labyrinthine corridors of the human heart to understand the beast that slumbers within. And the staggering truth is this: the single, undeniable peril isn't some external threat, some looming asteroid or pandemic, but ourselves. We are the walking, talking cataclysms. Our collective ignorance is a terrifying abyss. We know far too little of what makes us tick, what festers beneath the surface. His kind should be studied because we are the wellspring, the very genesis of all the evil yet to come. Ever felt that cold hand gripping your ankles, pulling you back just as you reach for something vital? Ever felt a sense of internal sabotage despite giving your best efforts? What if I told you a hidden saboteur resides within, a clandestine operative dictating your moves through uncanny synchronicity? This insidious double, this is what Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow is the uninvited guest at the feast of your consciousness, a repository of the disowned, the rejected, the denied. It's where repressed desires writhe, instincts howl, weaknesses fester, and those fragments of your personality deemed negative or undesirable are banished. These spectral traits, banished to the underworld of your psyche, exert a silent dominion over your behavior and emotions in ways that you often fail to consciously understand. To truly grasp the shadow's insidious power, we must descend into the depths of its genesis and its dominion over our lives. Jung, in his seminal work Psychology and Religion, illuminates this truth. Unfortunately, there can be no doubt that man is on the whole less good than he imagines himself or wants to be. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. If an inferiority is conscious, one always has a chance to correct it. Furthermore, it is constantly in contact with other interests so that it is continually subjected to modifications. But if it is repressed and isolated from consciousness, it never gets corrected. Everyone carries a shadow, a lurking twin formed of rejected aspects, and the less integrated into conscious life, the more malevolent it becomes. A conscious inferiority offers a path to correction, a constant negotiation with other facets of being. But repressed, isolated from the light of awareness, it festers, uncorrected, primed to erupt in a moment of unsuspecting vulnerability. Ultimately, it becomes an unseen wall, undermining even the purest intentions. The shadow, often revealed through eerie, meaningful coincidences, is forged in the crucible of societal norms, searing personal experiences, and the chilling act of repression. From our earliest days, we learn which thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are deemed unacceptable by our family, our culture, and our God, forcing these aspects into the darkness of the unconscious. Picture a child taught that anger is a sin, perpetually suppressing their rage, sculpting it into an integral part of their shadow. The shadow isn't merely a collection of flaws. It also guards hidden qualities, unrealized strengths, and untapped potentials. If left unexplored, these nascent abilities wither, leading to a diminished self, to invisible barriers hindering their very expression and growth. To know that everyone is bound to a shadow will help us recognize its profound impact on our lives. Next, let's plumb the depths and explore the myriad types of shadows, beginning with the most intimate one, the personal shadow. When analyzing a patient, expect a pattern, a predictable choreography in the integration of their personal shadow. Typically, through the excavation of dreams, you begin to unearth the contents of the unconscious. And, as I said before, initially, this material is intensely personal. Now that we've lifted the veil on the concept, let's plunge into the heart of the matter and examine the different species of shadow. Well, the ego postures as the representative of the real person, but as I often illustrate, take a case where B knows of A, but A remains ignorant of B. The ego, in that scenario, leans more towards C, possessing a more comprehensive understanding, while A stands as a fragmented personality. You see, when I invoke the self, I'm not merely referring to I myself, which constitutes only your empirical self, encompassed by the term ego. The self signifies a personality far more complete than the ego, since the ego consists solely of what dwells within conscious awareness. Jung draws a crucial distinction between the self and the ego. The ego acts as the representative of our conscious identity, the face we present to the world, while the self is a panoramic and holistic representation of our entire being, embracing both conscious and unconscious realms. Now, that was a very serious thing to me, because what else then, you see? And I hated that fellow, and that was the only man I could have killed, you know. If I had met him at a dark corner, I would have shown something of what I could do. Did you often have violent thoughts about people when you were young? No, not exactly. Only when they got mad. Well, then I beat them up. And did you get mad? Not so often, but then for good. You were very strong and big, I imagine. Yes, I was pretty strong, and you know, in the country with those boys, it was a rough kind of life, and I would have been capable of violence. I know I was a bit afraid of it, so I rather tried to avoid critical situations because I didn't trust myself. Once I was attacked by about 7 boys, and I got mad, and I took one and just swung him around with his legs, you know, and beat down 4 of them, and then they were satisfied. Jung, with raw honesty, reflects on his own simmering capacity for violence, a youthful aggression held in check. He acknowledges the potency of his emotions and physical prowess, but also the chilling fear of losing control, a fear that led him to navigate life with deliberate caution, avoiding situations that might ignite the fuse. Now that we've grasped the basic contours of the shadow, let's venture deeper into Jung's intricate model of the psyche. I wonder if you would mind telling us a little bit about how you, through this term, persona. Well, this is a practical concept we need in elucidating people's relations. I noticed with my patients, particularly with people that are in public life, that they have a certain way of presenting themselves. So the persona is partially the result of the demands society has, and on the other side, it is a compromise with what one likes to be or with what one likes to appear. Now, this is not the real personality, in spite of the fact that people will assure you that it is all quite real and quite honest. Yet it is not. Now, such a performance, or say the performance of the persona, is quite all right as long as you know that you are not identical with the way in which you appear. Within Jung's elaborate model of the psyche, myriad personified structures engage in a complex dance within our inner world. 2 prominent players, the persona and the anima animus, are fundamentally relational. The persona acts as our interface with the external world, while the anima animus guides our navigation of the internal landscape. The ego, rooted primarily in the physical body, can be seen as the executive branch of the personality, standing shoulder to shoulder with the shadow. Together, the ego and the shadow are pivotal to our core identity. The anima embodies the feminine essence residing within the unconscious of men. It represents the inner feminine dimension, exerting influence over men's relationships with women and shaping their emotional lives. Its reciprocal, the animus, is the masculine aspect dwelling within the unconscious of women. It represents the inner masculine side, wielding influence over women's interactions with men and sculpting their assertiveness and reasoning abilities. To understand how our unconscious mind shapes our reality, let's hear from Jung on the interplay between personal and collective shadows. It has 2 important conditions. One is the environmental influence, and the other is the given fact of the psyche as it is. The self is really a term that designates the whole personality, because the whole personality of man is indescribable. His consciousness can be described. His unconscious cannot be described, because the unconscious, as I must repeat myself, is always unconscious, and this is really unconscious, really does not know. And so we don't know our unconscious personality. We have hints, we have certain ideas, but we don't know it really. Nobody can say where man ends. That is the beauty of it, you know. It's very interesting. Jung emphasizes that our unconscious personality remains largely unknown to us, despite occasional glimmers of insight. He explains that the psyche is forged by the interplay of environmental forces and inherent psychological predispositions, etched into our being from the moment of birth. Well, chiefly his purely personal approach and his disregard of the historical conditions of man. You see, we depend largely upon our history. We are shaped through education, through the parents, which are by no means always personal. They were prejudiced or they were influenced by historical ideas, or what I call dominance, and that is a most decisive factor in psychology. We are not of today or of yesterday, we are of an immense age. Jung critiques a myopic approach to psychology that focuses solely on the individual, neglecting the profound impact of historical and collective influences. He asserts that our psyche is profoundly shaped by the weight of history, the sway of parental influence, and the ingrained societal norms, all deeply intertwined and influencing our psychological trajectory. Let's now take a closer look at the personal shadow in the collected works of C.G. Jung, Volume 9, Part 2, Ion. Carl Jung says, "Closer examination of the dark characteristics, that is, the inferiorities constituting the shadow, reveals that they have an emotional nature, a kind of autonomy, and accordingly, an obsessive or better possessive quality. These are usually aspects of the personality which one tries to hide, repress, and deny to oneself and others, because they are things which one has no wish to be. Failing to acknowledge and grapple with our shadow can unleash a torrent of problems. Cast your mind back to a time when you were seized by an intense, seemingly irrational emotion. Was it truly about the immediate trigger, or did its roots run deeper, tapping into something ancient and buried? The shadow becomes most visible in the throes of anxiety or other intense emotions. Under the influence of alcohol, for example, one might unexpectedly unleash a hostile remark during an otherwise amicable conversation. When we refuse to assimilate what we despise within ourselves, we project it outwards onto others, making them the carriers of our inner darkness. Many individuals refuse to acknowledge their shadow so completely that the ego remains oblivious to shadow behavior, stripped of any ability to command it. Under these conditions, the shadow runs rampant, operating autonomously, manifesting as inexplicable mood swings, simmering irritability, and even acts of outright cruelty. So, the psychical events are facts, are realities, and when you observe the stream of images within, you observe an aspect of the world within. Because the psyche, if you understand it as a phenomenon that takes place in all living bodies, then it is a quality of matter. As our body consists of matter, we discover that this matter has another aspect, namely, a psychic aspect. Let's now explore the positive aspects of understanding our shadow from the book C.G. Jung, Speaking, Interviews, and Encounters. When you observe the world, you see people, you see houses, you see the sky, you see tangible objects. But when you observe yourself within, you see moving images, a world of images generally known as fantasies. Yet these fantasies are facts. You see, it is a fact that a man has such and such a fantasy, such a tangible fact, that when a man has a certain fantasy, another man may lose his life, or a bridge may be built. These houses were all fantasies. Everything you do here, all of the houses, everything was fantasy to begin with, and fantasy has a proper reality. This should not be forgotten. Fantasy is not nothing. It is, of course, not a tangible object, but it is a fact nevertheless. There is an impersonal stum in our psyche, and I can tell you an example. We had a patient in the world. He was quiet but completely dissociated schizophrenic, and he was in the clinic already for over 20 years. He had come into the clinic, as a matter of fact, being a young man, a little CL, and there's no particular education. Once I came to the ward, and he was obviously excited and called to me, took me by the label of my coat, and led me to the window, and said, Now you must see. Now look at it, look up at the sun, and see how it moves. See, you must move your head too like this, and then you will see the follows of the sun, and you know that's the origin of the wind. And you see how the sun moves as you move your head from one side to the other. Now, of course, I didn't understand that. All I thought was, there you are, he's just crazy. But that case remained in my mind, and 4 years later, I came across a paper written by the German Umeran, who had dealt with the so-called metus literi, a part of the great Parisian sorcerer Papos. And there he produced the part of the soul M'Lai, namely Say, there after the second prayer, thou will see how the disk of the sun unfolds, and you will see hanging down from it the tube, the origin of the wind. And when you move thy face to the regions of the east, it will move there, and if you move your face to the region of the west, it will follow you. And instantly I knew, now this is it. This is the vision of my patient. But how could you be sure that your patient wasn't unconsciously recalling something that somebody had told you? Oh no, quite out of the question, because that thing was not known. It was in a magic papos in Paris, and it wasn't even published. It was only published 4 years later, after I had observed it with my patient. And this, you felt, proved that there was an unconscious which was something more than personal. Oh well, that was not a proof to me, but it was a hint, and I took the hint. These examples are crucial because they illuminate Carl Jung's profound understanding of the unconscious mind and its far-reaching influence on our behavior and perceptions. By demonstrating that fantasies and dreams possess a tangible reality, Jung emphasizes that the unconscious is not merely a forgotten attic. Instead, it serves as a dynamic and powerful force, actively shaping our experiences and driving our actions. This understanding underscores that our inner world holds as much weight and influence as the external reality we perceive around us. Throughout his work, Jung underscores the imperative of cultivating awareness of the shadow in psychotherapy and its projections in individual lives. While commonly perceived as negative, the shadow also possesses a positive dimension. In truth, exploring our shadow grants us access to a trove of positive attributes. Jung elaborates on this with quotes from the collected works of C.G. Jung, Volume 9, Part 2. The first of these is the shadow, that hidden, repressed, for the most part inferior and guilt-laden personality whose ultimate ramifications reach back into the realm of our animal ancestors and so comprise the whole historical aspect of the unconscious. If it has been believed hitherto that the human shadow was the source of evil, it can now be ascertained on closer investigation that the unconscious man, that is his shadow, does not consist only of morally reprehensible tendencies, but also displays a number of good qualities, such as normal instincts, appropriate reactions, realistic insights, creative impulses, etc. Man is not complete if he is not conscious of that aspect of things. So I see a man is not complete when he lives in a world of statistical truth. He must live in a world of his biological truth. That is biological truth. That is not nearly satisfactory. It is the expression of what he really is as what he feels himself. These insights articulate Jung's views on the shadow and the self, underscoring the importance of acknowledging and integrating all facets of our personality to attain psychological wholeness. Marie-Louise von Franz, a close collaborator of Jung, writes in Man and His Symbols, Part 3, The Process of Individuation, the realization of the shadow. The shadow is not necessarily always an opponent. In fact, he is exactly like any human being with whom one has to get along, sometimes by giving in, sometimes by resisting, sometimes by giving love, whatever the situation requires. The shadow becomes hostile only when he is ignored or misunderstood. Well, in practical life, they emerge. But the personal shadow is the personal shortcomings of things which every human being could be conscious of, which is not archetypal and therefore not a mystery. For instance, such things as greed for money or jealousy. Jealousy is one of the main aspects of the shadow, or laziness, sloppiness, unrelatedness, sentimentality, and whatnot. Inferiorities which everybody has but prefers not to know about. As to the personal nature of the unconscious, the personal quality of the unconscious in a given case where you take an example, well, his unconscious has then an introverted quality, because all the extroverted qualities are played in consciousness and has qualities. That gave me a lead of the diagnostic value. It helped me to understand my patients. Marie-Louise von Franz and Carl Jung collectively stress that acknowledging, understanding, and integrating the shadow, a complex, emotional, and deeply personal aspect of our unconscious, is essential for attaining psychological wholeness and profound self-awareness. To better understand this, let's visualize the shadow. Imagine your shadow as a dark figure relentlessly trailing you. Initially, it looms as something intimidating, but as you finally turn to confront it, you realize it's simply a discarded fragment of yourself, craving understanding and compassion. For instance, a person might believe that being assertive equates to rudeness or aggression, thereby forsaking the qualities of confidence and the capacity to advocate for oneself honestly and respectfully, which, in turn, may inhibit proactivity, hinder career advancement, and create struggles with finances. Therefore, when encountering an assertive individual, that person subconsciously experiences resentment and guilt, thereby further darkening and solidifying their shadow. These valuable aspects ought to be embraced and woven into the tapestry of our lived experience, not relentlessly repressed. The ego must relinquish its inflated pride because your unconscious stands in a compensatory relationship to your consciousness. Eventually, you grasp the full panorama. If one possesses the full picture and the requisite moral fortitude, only then can true healing commence. But in the end, it remains a moral imperative. It is the manifestation of the situation of the unconscious. To put this into practice, let's talk about actionable advice for shadow work. Initiate your own shadow work by maintaining a journal. Record moments when you experienced a surge of intense emotional reaction and then reflect on the potential triggers. Over time, you'll begin to discern recurring patterns, revealing the hidden facets of your shadow. Observe your emotional reactions throughout the day. When a strong reaction surfaces, pause and ask yourself what ignited it. Record your observations to unearth underlying patterns. We also encounter our shadow in our dreams, often appearing as a figure of the same sex as the dreamer. It manifests as an inner critic, an internal judge scrutinizing our character from the depths of the unconscious, often leaving us with a feeling of profound embarrassment. We must identify the contents of the shadow and integrate them into our personality. It is a regular observation that when you talk to an individual, and this individual gives you insight into their inner preoccupations, interests, emotions, the other hands over their personal complexes, then you get slowly and nearly into the situation of a sort of authority, a point of view become a point of reference. Jung suggests that by confronting and integrating our shadow, we can transform these repressed aspects into a source of inner authority and self-awareness, becoming a point of reference for our own personal growth. Let's now explore how to integrate shadow aspects into our lives. Through the analysis of dreams, for instance, you become acquainted with the contents of the unconscious. This is the process of the realization of the shadow, also known as shadow work. Here begins the painful and lengthy work of self-education. One must enter into long and difficult negotiations with the shadow, a work, we might say, that is the psychological equivalent of the labors of Hercules. Of Sisyphus, through shadow work, one can observe one's shadow outwardly by watching one's emotional reactions and being radically honest about one's interactions with others, and inwardly by exploring one's dreams. Before we delve into the fascinating ways our shadow manifests in our lives, let's first understand how this hidden aspect intricately weaves into the very fabric of our identity. In Carl Jung's collected works, Volume 13, Alchemical Studies, Jung tells us that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The latter procedure, however, is disagreeable and therefore not popular. With a deeper understanding of our identity, it's time to witness the shadow in action. Let's explore how this concealed part of ourselves manifests in everyday behaviors and decisions. Understanding our shadow is crucial, but it doesn't have to be a daunting task. It can be a fascinating journey of self-discovery. This allows one to become enlightened and reduces the shadow's destructive potential, not so much by waging war against the darkness, but by bringing the darkness to the light to the darkness. From Carl Jung's collected works, Volume 12, Psychology and Alchemy. There is no light without shadow, and no psychic wholeness without imperfection. However scary or dark it is to confront our shadow, finding truth brings relief. Discernment of the truth is the process of authenticity, a painstaking excavation into the depths of our being to explore possibilities and limitations, distortions, the buried and often forgotten parts of ourselves and abilities. Most people, however, are too indolent to think deeply about even those moral aspects of their behavior of which they are conscious, let alone to consider how the unconscious affects them. Here's another actionable step you can take in your daily interactions. Practice being radically honest with yourself. If you feel irritation or discomfort, reflect on whether these feelings might be related to your shadow. Look for synchronicities that may provide insights. Now that we've covered the personal shadow, let's explore the collective shadow. The shadow can also consist of factors that stem from a source outside the individual's personal life. Here is when we stumble upon the collective shadow, the dark side or the unknown or little-known aspects of a society and culture. It consists of that which opposes our shared and collective values. To understand this better, let's look at the broader implications of the collective shadow. Archetypal ideas stream through one individual through the centuries. It is like a continuous stream that comes to daylight in the great mass movements, say in political movements or in spiritual movements. For instance, in the time before the Reformation, people dreamt of the Great Change, and that's the reason why such great transformations could be predicted. Jung said, "If somebody has been clever enough to see what is going on in people's minds in the unconscious, he would be able to predict it. For I have predicted the Nazi rising in Germany through the observation of my German patients. They had dreams in which the whole thing was anticipated in considerable detail." The collective shadow, a vast and often horrifying dimension of human existence, inflicts profound wounds on humanity and the natural world, leaving indelible scars across generations. It manifests through projected darkness, systemic violence, pervasive oppression, and the steadfast denial of responsibility. It erupts in the cataclysms of wars, the horrors of genocides, and the insidious erasure of cultures. This pervasive yet elusive force breeds unspeakable atrocities, relentless persecution, and widespread suffering, often cloaked beneath the guise of seemingly benevolent actions, like the enforcement of a single language. Outwardly, it reveals itself as stark physical suffering, crushing poverty, and rampant crime, while inwardly it fosters self-loathing, crippling depression, and a thirst for vengeance that perpetuates the cycle of suffering. Let's dive deeper into the collective shadow and its relation to evil. The collective shadow has long been equated with the concept of evil, resonating with the Christian archetype of the devil, where possession strips away one's humanity, replacing it with a demonic essence. For Jung, the ultimate defense against such evil lies in the relentless pursuit of self-knowledge and wholeness. Each individual must confront the full spectrum of their capabilities, acknowledging both the boundless good they can achieve and the potential for unspeakable crimes that lurks within. You know, every society has collective problems, collective convictions, and so on. Now we are very much influenced by them because you belong to a certain political party, to a certain confession, and that can be a serious determinant of your behavior. Now, as personal conflict doesn't touch upon it, it's no question it doesn't appear. But the moment you transcend your personal sphere and come to your unpersonal determinants, say to the question of a political question or any other social question which really matters to you, then you are confronted with a collective problem. Then you have collective things. When an issue festers within a particular society, it can be designated a shadow issue if there is evidence of denial, pervasive projection, and a systemic failure to embrace individual and collective accountability. Therefore, embracing responsibility morally, politically, and spiritually is of paramount importance. The courage with which we shoulder our own darkness frees others from the burden of carrying it. To illustrate, let's discuss dealing with the past and taking responsibility. To respond to the immense historical suffering, wars, genocides, holocausts, and pervasive oppression, the reverberations of which continue to shape our world, we must learn as a human race. Denial, often intertwined with a desperate desire to move forward and bury the past, is the most prevalent reaction. Numerous attempts have been made to grapple with painful histories through public apologies, acts of repentance, reparation payments, and pilgrimages to sites of profound suffering. But how do we facilitate the deep and widespread integration of the shadow within an entire population, rather than merely addressing it symbolically through figureheads or policies? Remembering and giving voice to the unspeakable is a harrowing process for victims, perpetrators, bystanders, and witnesses alike. Such a process achieves a measure of success when pain, outrage, betrayal, suffering, and all other emotions have been articulated and truly heard, and when genuine responsibility has been accepted. Truth-telling stands as both the most desirable and most viable path to grapple with a troubled past. The fate of the world hangs by a thread woven from the fragile psyche of humankind. Assume that certain fellows in Moscow lose their nerve or their common sense for a bit, and the whole world is in fire and flames. Nowadays, we are not threatened by elementary catastrophes. There's no such thing as an age. That is all man's doing. We are the great danger. Psyche is the great danger. What if something goes wrong with the psyche? See, it is demonstrated to us in our day what the power of psyche is in man, how important it is to know something about it. But we know nothing about it. No one would give credit to the idea that the psychical processes of the ordinary man have any importance whatever. One horrifying example of a mass psychosis fueled by the collective shadow is the persistence of systemic racism and police brutality, where deeply entrenched prejudices and unconscious biases can escalate into pervasive discrimination and horrifying acts of violence. Ordinary individuals, under certain circumstances, find themselves participating in or tacitly supporting actions they would normally find abhorrent. The personal shadow serves as a bridge to the collective shadow. Therefore, resolving one's inner conflicts and facing one's personal shadow is essential to prevent unconsciously succumbing to the collective shadow, often revealed through unsettling synchronicities. By embarking on this transformative journey, we gain the power to influence others, creating a ripple effect that benefits society as a whole. Suppose a patient comes to that level, or that his conflict begins to become really very serious, that his mind might suffer, then he can have a collective conflict. The question that looms before us is this: how can we confront the collective shadow with courage and conviction? We must begin by fearlessly confronting our own personal shadows through relentless self-examination, cultivating unwavering honesty in our interactions, monitoring our emotional responses with vigilance, and engaging with the cryptic language of our dreams. This arduous process prevents us from becoming unwitting pawns of our shadow and our unconscious projections, enabling us to unearth and harness the positive attributes buried within us, ultimately enriching not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us. By acknowledging the existence and power of the collective shadow, we can inoculate ourselves against its influence and embrace our responsibility to address ignored issues and overcome the absence of both personal and collective action. Embracing our darkness with courage not only offers solace to others, but ensures that we grapple with and rectify the wrongs of the past, preventing the shadow from gaining strength and preventing history from repeating its tragic cycles. You see, everyone who says that I'm a mystic, is just an idiot. Well, he doesn't understand the first word of fact, and soon the world will be covered in ashes.